I want to talk now about several, to me, what I would consider essential skills in being able to be effective as a coach, being able actually to be effective as a counselor too, for that matter. And in many ways, arguably, it's effective as being a human being in relationship. These are skills that to me are must-have skills. If you don't do these well, you're going to be much less effective as a coach than if you do these well. So let's go over them one by one. I actually have these into 3 different categories, or you can say 4, depending. One is how you question people and listen. You can break those into 2, but I'm going to sort of make them 1. Having powerful questions and then being able to listen. Secondly is how we pace, is what I call that. That's probably the strongest rapport builder you can have. And then how you frame and reframe what you're hearing, which is also very, very important to understand. But let's talk about questioning and listening, okay? What I find in this is that so often, over and over again in all walks of life, that most people are, instead of really listening or asking good questions or just waiting their turn to talk, it's very, very difficult, especially in our society where we give everything continuous partial attention, to really focus on another person, to hear what they have to say, to ask them questions to expand on what they have to say, and really get an understanding of what they're saying to you. Now here's where it's critical. Because we all speak the same language, I assume most people listening to this do, there is the sense that there is a much more of an instant understanding of what other people are saying than there actually is. And because of that, I hear somebody say something, it triggers my own story, it draws up my own understandings and my own reality, and what I do is I place those understandings into the situation without taking the time that I needed to understand what the person is actually experiencing. In other words, listening and questioning is much, much more difficult than it looks. And because of the way our society is wired now, with people going as quickly as they do, and giving attention so partially to so many different things and multitasking and whatnot, listening has almost become a skill that's being lost now. And then, too, with the other technological assists in this, people are listening and they're texting. And so often when I'm speaking to groups now, people are on their iPads, they're on their iPhones and Blackberries, and I know they're giving me kind of an ear, but they're also attending to many other things. And as a result, I always think, given the partial attention they're giving to me and to whoever else they're dealing with at that time, they probably have a partial understanding of what's going on. I say all that to say that when it comes to the coaching relationship, it becomes absolutely critical that you develop the skill of listening and asking questions. If you do, it will very much separate you in our society and will set you apart. People will very much recognize you as somebody very different, if you will, from the average person who is just giving things partial attention and letting it go by. Let's talk about, though, powerful questions, because great coaches and actually great leaders are people who ask a lot of questions and offer much fewer answers. Now that's hard for men, and especially men in leadership, often to hear, because we like to be dispensing advice, dispensing answers. That gives us a powerful sense of who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. But it's a very, very unpowerful position to be in if you will, when it comes to really helping people from a coaching point of view. Well, let's talk about the characteristics, and some of these things will be in some of the slides that you'll see. Let's talk about some of the nature of powerful questions that I think would be helpful for you to understand. First of all, powerful questions come from a place of genuine curiosity. I find the most effective coaches and the most effective counselors are people who are genuinely curious about other people. They don't just assume that people fall into certain categories. They listen for complexity. They enjoy hearing other people's stories. They pursue what those stories are about and the effects that it has had on people's lives. And they're genuinely curious. That's why they're able to ask powerful questions. The questions themselves, by the way, are direct, simple, and usually open-ended. There's very little yes-no kind of questioning, in other words. They're questions that are looking for more. And I've put in I'm not going to go over these, I've put in the slides that you're going to be seeing, I've put some of these powerful questions there, like, how do you want to change your mind on this topic? Now, that's a pretty interesting question when you think about it. It's very open-ended. It doesn't lead a person in a particular direction necessarily, but it gives an opening for somebody to really express a great deal. Powerful questions also generate creative thinking and surface underlying information. Remember, people are very complex. If you really want to understand what's going on, you're going to have to take the time to figure it out and ask the questions that are needed. Unfortunately, we don't tend to give these things the time that it's needed. We tend to jump to conclusions very quickly, and those conclusions emerge, guess where? From our own story, okay? So I think I heard you saying this, and so I'll just go ahead and make that assumption and go off on a whole track of what I'm going to say next, assuming that I heard what you said, when in fact I may have completely missed the point. The last thing about powerful questions is that they encourage self-reflection. They really get a person to think about what they are and what's important to them and those kinds of things. And of course, when it's in a coaching relationship, it in many ways really encourages them to consider a lot of the things we've been talking about being self-aware, about what is their intentional difference and their potential bent in life. What are the red zone issues that affect them? That kind of things becomes very, very important. Now, when it comes to listening, there's several principles of listening which are very, very important to remember. One is, some of these are very simple and you've heard them before, but I'm going to reiterate them now because I think they're important. Number one is to face the speaker. Now, some of you are going to be doing some of your coaching on the phone, and obviously you can't, you can face the receiver, but you can't face the speaker. But facing the person that you're coaching is very important, as is eye contact. Now, culturally, you have to be aware of, by the way, if you're some Asian cultures and some different cultures in the world, eye contact is not a good thing. So you need to be aware of that. If somebody is not maintaining good eye contact with you, it may be a cultural thing, so be aware of that. You very much want to minimize distractions, which means cell phones and all the other things that break into our conversations with people. This is going to sound like a terrible sin probably to some of you, but I tend to leave my cell phone in the car a lot. I never take it to church, but I leave it in the car a lot. Sometimes I'll leave it in the car all weekend. I figure if it's an emergency, they'll figure out a better way to get a hold of me. If it's not, then it can wait. And by the way, I experience about one emergency about every 2 years. So minimize those distractions when you're coaching somebody, because if you allow distractions, what you're saying to them is everything else is important to me, not you, okay? And then, of course, it's important to respond appropriately to show that you understand what's happening. If you don't understand, you keep asking questions. In fact, one of my favorite phrases to start with is, help me understand what you're saying here. Let me tell you what I hear you saying. I hear you saying that blah, 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 blah. Is that kind of what you're saying? In other words, I'm checking, realizing that left to my own devices, I'm going to come up with an interpretation of what I've heard, and there's a good chance that it's not going to correspond with what is actually being said. So let me leave that right at the moment. We're going to talk about pacing in just a minute, but some of the notes that you have here, and I've put down in here some of the questions you can ask people. Now, it depends on your coaching as to what you're actually trying to do. Are you, are people asking you specific skills about preaching is one thing. If you're really trying to help them understand a very complex organizational problem that they're facing, that's quite a different one, where you really need to ask, I would ask a lot of questions to get a sense of, okay, what organizationally, like my STAR model that I gave you, what is the structure of this place? Where are you trying to get to? What are the processes that seem to be getting in your way to achieving where you want to be? So I'll ask lots of questions along that line until I think I have a fairly decent understanding as to what's going on.